This is the homework helper for Chapter 12, Section 2 in the 7th grade workbook, Solving Multi-Step Equations. We'll go ahead and move down past the first few questions there and move into what looks like some more difficult questions. We're going to focus kind of on the middle there, 7 through 15. We won't do all of them, but that's definitely a more difficult set of questions to work with. Let's start with number 7. 4k minus 14 plus 3k equals 21. Now what this section is about is really about combining like terms. And we'll spend more time dealing with like terms here in a section kind of all dedicated to just the concept of like terms because there's more to it. However, really what you need to know here is like terms are two things. They are either just the numbers, which we're going to put those together anyway because we know numbers are going to go to the right side, and variables. In these questions, you're pretty much always going to have the same variable to the same power, and we're just going to combine those. Because they're all going to be on the left, however, the variables we're not going to do opposite side to the opposite. The same would be true if we had two numbers that were on the left and then before we move them to the right. We would just combine them as is. The only time when you use opposite side do the opposite is when you actually move something to the opposite side. If you're not moving something to the opposite side, you're not doing the opposite. And that's where people tend to make mistakes here. So let's look at 7. A couple different ways we can start. Let's go ahead and move the 14 out of the way first here. Now that is a number and it's on the left side, but of course it's supposed to be on the right side. So that we are going to continue using opposite side to the opposite. Since this says minus 14 here, the opposite is going to be to add 14 to both sides. And so this minus 14 plus 14 cancels each other out, and 21 and 14 go together to make 35. What I have left over here is 4k plus 3k. Well, now I have two variable things on the left side, and I want to combine those, which is, again, called combining like terms. If I have 4k's and I add 3 more k's, what you end up with is 7k's. So that whole left side there is going to simplify to say 7k, and it's going to equal 35. Now, again, some people might be saying, well, why didn't you write 1k? You've always been talking about doing the opposite. Well, the reason I didn't write 1k is because I didn't move it to the opposite side. They were both on the left side of the equal sign, and when they were done and I combined them, they're still both on the left side of the equal sign. So it's just a matter of me putting these together, nothing else. All right, so I do that, and I have 7k's, and it equals 35. Well, now it's just a one-step equation, which is something we've seen a whole lot of. I'm going to go ahead and divide out the 7 here. Because again, I'm doing the opposite to move something to the opposite side. That's a number and it's going to the right. 35 divided by 7 is going to give me 5. All right, let's practice that again in number 8. We've got 9m plus 10 minus 14m equals negative 5. So let's go ahead and do the variables first. We did move the number first last time. It doesn't really matter. Either way, the result would be the same. So on the left side, as you can see, I have 9m and 14m. And I can go ahead and just put those together because they're both variable things and they're on the left side, which is where they're supposed to be. I'm going to do exactly what it says. And since this says minus 14m, I'm going to take 9m and subtract 14m's. Well, when I take 9m's and subtract 14m's, that gives me negative 5m's. So these go together to make negative 5m's. And I'm going to write all the rest of the stuff just like I see it. Plus 10 equals negative 5. All right, so now it's a two-step equation like we spent time looking at in 12.1. We have two number things on the left side, and we have to figure out which one goes first and which one's going to move last. But we know that the thing that's directly connected to the variable by multiplication or division goes last. Negative 5 is directly connected to m by multiplication, so it's got to move last. which means the 10 is going to move first. And now I'm going to go back to using opposite side, do the opposite here, because I'm moving these to the opposite side of the equal sign. So I'm subtracting 10s all the way around, and that's going to give me negative 5m equals negative 15. And then I'm going to go ahead and simplify this one-step equation by doing the opposite, which is to divide. Dividing both sides by negative 5. When I do that, m equals 3. Now, as you can see in the next couple of lines, all of a sudden what they do is they introduce the concept of parentheses. And when parentheses are introduced, what they're really implying here is working with the distributive property. What the distributive property says, again, in case you need a reminder, is you're going to take the number that's in front of those parentheses and multiply it through to everything inside those parentheses. And that's going to give you an equivalent expression which you would then be able to solve. So let's take a look at number 10. You've got 3 times n plus 5, which is in parentheses, and then after the parentheses we're adding 2 and it equals 26. Let's focus on that 3 times n plus 5 part first. We're going to go ahead and take the 3 and multiply it through to the things that are inside the parentheses, which would be the n and the 5. And again, that's called the distributive property. So I'm going to take the 3 through to the n. Well, that's pretty easy because 3 and n can't make anything more fancy than 3n. And then I'm going to take the 3 through to the 5. 3 through to 5 is going to make 15. Whatever sign's in the middle, unless there's a negative that mixes things up, is going to stay in the middle. So since it was plus in the middle, it's still plus in the middle. So 3 times n plus 5 is the same as 3n plus 15. And all this stuff at the end is just going to stay at the end. I'm not doing anything else with it right now. All I've done is I've simplified this part here that was in the parentheses. All right, and now that I've done that, now I can go ahead and jump into all those rules and steps that we've been using here. Now, what's nice about this question is you don't have two variables, unlike the last couple questions you've looked at. You have two numbers on the left side there, the 15 and the 2. Those are both going to get shoved over to the right side. If you want, you can move them separately, or if you want, you can combine them and then move them. But let's go ahead and move them separately because that just might be easier. We take 15 off both sides, that's going to cancel out the 15s, and then we're going to take 2 off both sides, and that's going to cancel out the 2s. So what am I left with? I'm left with 3n equals 26 minus 15 minus 2, that's the same as 9. So I have 3n equals 9. All right, well, this is a multiplication question, which is going to be solved by division. So now I'm going to finish this by dividing both sides by 3. I know I'm doing the opposite here. I know 3 is a number, and eventually it's got to move over to that right side. We know the thing with the variable would go last, which is why 3n is the last thing I'm touching, the 3 specifically. Those 3's cancel out, and n equals 3. Let's practice some more with the distributive property in one of the more difficult looking questions on the page anyway. Question number 14. Question 14 says 6 equals 8 times s minus 3/4, which is in parentheses, the s minus 3/4, minus 20. All right, so one of the things that should be bothering you about this question is that the variable is on the wrong side of the equal sign. The variable s is on the right side of the equal sign, but the way we solve questions, we always want to have the variable on the left side of the equal sign. So what we're going to do to start here is we're going to go ahead and flip this whole question around, and we're going to rewrite this as 8 times s minus 3/4 minus 20 equals 6. And that's just me fixing the question so that the variable is on the left side. Okay, so let's continue from there then. We see we have those parentheses again, so that's going to imply distributive property. So we're going to go ahead and distribute that 8 through to the things that are inside the parentheses. That's what distributive property is. Again, we're taking the number that's directly in front of those parentheses and carrying it through to the things inside those parentheses. It's always somehow attached with what would be believed to be multiplication. We wouldn't ever do the 20 because he's after a subtraction sign. The same would be true if it was after an addition sign. It would not be the part we're distributing. We're always distributing what comes through with multiplication. So 8 through the s, that's pretty nice. That's going to make 8s. Now 8 through 3/4. Now some of you might not be particularly liking that question, but realize what it is. If I put the 8 over 1, the 8 and the 4 are going to reduce and give me 1 and 2. So that all that works out to be is 6. And then all this stuff at the end I still have. Minus 20 equals 6. And so even though we have a question that looked really nasty and required us to flip to get the variables on the left, it's really pretty good. If we go through our steps keeping the variables on the left, s is on the left side, numbers on the right, 6 is on the right side. A lot of stuff to move here. We have to move the 8, the 6, and the 20. Again, we know that the thing with the variable is going to go last. So since 8 is directly connected to the variable, he's moving last, which means 6 and 20 have to go first here. As far as moving 6 and 20, remember, opposite side, do the opposite. So since both of them have minus in front of them, both of them are going to move by adding. And again, we can do them separately or we can combine them and then move them. It doesn't really matter. So when I do that, that's going to give me 8s equals 6 plus 6, which is 12, plus 20, which is 32. So I've got 8s equals 32. Multiplication problem to be solved by division. This is a very basic one-step equation at this point. I'm dividing both sides by 8 to solve here. And when I do that, s equals 4, because 32 divided by 8 is 4.